Okay, welcome everyone to the second half of today. This afternoon's panel is titled Making the City, State, Space and Marginalities. And we have a lineup of really interesting papers on looking at different aspects of economic change and its intersection with social processes and how that actually, makes marginalities in the city. So we have 3 of our speakers joining online and 3 of us are here in person. We'll take around 10 to 12 minutes for each presentation, and you'll have a time check right here. So we'll follow the order in the program, but we'll start with Federica and work our way down. So Federica, and then Ranjani, and then Aditi, and then the folks online. So I'll start by inviting Federica Duca from the Public Affairs Research Institute, and she's going to be talking about the case of the Lanseria Smart City. And over to you, Federica.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Am I audible? Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity and welcome back from the lunch break. So my presentation today will be on a case of a smart city that is going to be built from scratch in Johannesburg, South Africa. And really my interest is to understand to what extent this project of a smart city is a democratic one, and how can we read the creation of new cities from scratch as democratic project, if at all is possible. And this is in line with the sort of my line of interest in urban transformation, but most importantly on how elites and wealth capture urban spaces. So I've moved from studying gated communities, Gulf estates, and now these sort of big mega projects. And is also triggered by a fundamental sort of interest in understanding how we can transform cities in a way that is emancipatory. And so linking to this, I'm really interested in understanding why do we use the trope of the smart city, but most importantly, why do we want to build new cities from scratch for something to be democratic? And obviously, this is done keeping in mind the political economy, the material conditions in a country that is highly unequal and unjust, but also looking at the level of the imaginary, and possibilities that can emerge from this context. So in 2019, the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, at the State of the Nation address, announces that it's now time for South Africa to move beyond apartheid geography. As you know, apartheid has been sort of a very bad mark of South African history for more than 50 years. And it says, well, we haven't built a new city in 25 years of democracy. It is now time to do that. And it says that he would like to invite all South Africans to begin imagining this prospect. So since 1994, the time of democracy, there have been a lot of efforts to repair the damages of apartheid. But if you go in any South African city, you see that apartheid geography is still very present. So why smart cities? Smart cities obviously are seen as, the enthusiastic literature sees the use of technology as aiding obviously smart governance, better trust between citizens and the state, better delivery of everything. But obviously there is a dark side to that. And, smart cities are not always developmental. And I find very helpful the framing of the right to the smart city, which actually takes into account who has been left behind and asks us to expose, to propose, and to politicize all of these projects. I'm also looking at the local context and the different social and political understandings of what a smart city is. So how it moves from being like a big abstract concept to something that is more sort of concrete. But obviously there's issues of policy implementation and governance. And when it's seen as entirely new projects, as mega projects, they're usually seen as sort of ways to overcome the complexities of the current cities. So cities are complex, are complicated. We just don't deal with the old city. We just create a new one and the problems won't exist. They're sometimes linked to nationalistic projects, but also there is this sort of imperial colonial trope of like conquering empty lands from which we can do anything that we want. So with this sort of framing in mind, really my idea was to understand if this Lanseria Smart City project, aligned to the transformation ethos that it claims to have as its motivation. And I've been trying to look at who is contesting for the space, for these new empty spaces, whom are they aspirational for, and for whom are the opportunities. And also, what does building a new city mean vis-a-vis the existing city? Because here we're not building a new administrative city. We're just building a whole new set of residential and commercial area that actually aspires to have the function of a city, but not the political functions of it. And so in the South African context, this was seen as a city building, the holistic post-apartheid city, under the pillars of sustainability, a compact city spatially, but complex socially, that looks at urban intensification, residential integration, and fostering public environment. So this project was quite particular, because in a way also tries to endorse the critiques of building that are being made to building a new city, and tries to incorporate them. The city is going to be built, in the northern western part of the city, where there's that sort of circle pointed in the red dots. And there's an airport, an international airport, but all around is basically empty. It's like 50,000 hectares of land. And it follows actually a process of urban sprawl that in Johannesburg started in the early 70s. With the move towards north. But importantly, all of these moves and all of this sprawl and new developments have always come with a reconfiguration of the relationship between sort of private sector, citizens, and local government, and actually a recomposition of the local or decomposition of local government at all times. So the city basically, and the architects that have been working on the city, mandated obviously by government, they say that they really wanted to shift the paradigm of the South African city. And they say when planning and conceptualizing this project, our counterpart was Saint City and Waterfall. We did not want to reproduce spatial inequality. And this is what Saint City is. Next slide, please. Oh, it's me. Sorry. Is basically a big gated estate. So they didn't want to reproduce that. They were actually quite strongly thinking strongly that this is not what needed to be recreated. And in fact, a new city needed to be created because we needed to have housing being delivered in a non-segregated way and not in undergated communities. So this is what we have. We have now in Lanseria, as I said, this massive 50,000 hectares piece of land, which is mostly 80% is private. And there is a massive airport, and you've got informal settlements, you've got gated housing, and you've got new development that is emerging in the last, say, 5 to 7 years. And basically, this is the project. The project is to consolidate all of that exists and create something that, according to the architects, resembles a public city and something that is more integrated than it exists. The trope of the smart city, actually, it sort of like comes and goes. It fades away and it comes back, depending on like the angle that we want to look at. But the architects, again, seem to be quite critical of not wanting to rely only on technology, and so to make a smart city that is actually a socially smart city. So with all of this context in mind, now, I've been trying to look at understanding what does, what did this project mean for government, for local government, and for the residents, and how did they make sense of this project vis-a-vis the democratic city, creating a democratic city, and what that meant. So for government, and here I talk at the national and provincial level, it seemed quite obvious that, well, we have to overcome apartheid geography. So we have to go and create a new city, no matter what. But interestingly, when, sort of delving and trying to go a little more in depth into what it is that it is a new democratic city, government officials were not able to describe what a democratic city would look like. And they just saw everything in terms of delivery. So a democratic city will be one where we will deliver more housing. Doesn't matter to who, doesn't matter how. A democratic city will be a city where there will be better trash collection. Doesn't matter for who and doesn't matter for all of these kind of things. But they were quite strong about having a new city. On the other side, the city of Johannesburg was quite sort of polemical about the project. They say, we are the city and we don't want a new city. But here again, and I mean, there was like a conflict of, a city, creating a new city against the current administrative city. And this created, at the same time, a huge backlog in, putting the project forward. And they say, like, the right city is the one that we have. We have to make these ones smarter. We don't need to create new ones. Now, if we go on the ground, we see that there's like very different reactions to this. On the one side, there's skepticism. On the other side, there's like a form of challenge and opportunity. So, yeah. Opportunity, obviously, is mostly taken from private developers, right? That they say, we don't need an administrative city. So a new smart city that, takes into consideration our own sort of needs, which is, for instance, with this project, we can enter the sub-Saharan market and we can develop just housing. Suits us just fine, is good sort of praxis. But obviously the city here, and when we see the city, we talk of the city of Johannesburg, the administrative city, is also seen as incapable by many of the residents. They say, but well, why to build a new smart city when we don't even have sort of basic infrastructure? Finally, there is like, residents of informal settlements mostly are the ones that actually have articulated in quite interesting ways the idea of a democratic city. And it was quite oppositional to local government in all of its forms. And they say our, sort of an inclusive city is one that includes, and we don't want delivery. We want to be able to stay where we are. So we don't even ask government to deliver anymore. So I'm winding down. Is Lanseria democratic? Well, it seems that this project, and I have to say, after 3 years of its approval, nothing has happened yet, right? So the project is basically not existing at the moment, even though all of the approvals are in place. Because the city of Johannesburg doesn't want to provide basic infrastructure, and because of a huge conflict of interest in this project, there's nothing going on here. And it seems that at this point, what it is just an iteration of uneven urban development where delivery is at the expenses of the democratic process, because everything is put forward in the name of delivery, but excludes actually any form of thinking through what it is that a post-apartheid democratic city would look like. And this develops in three particular ways. So it is obviously a terrain of contestation on the meaning and the function of a smart city, as well as on its feasibility, right? There's a lack of cohesive vision. But also there is no institutional debate on what makes a democratic city, and there's a contestation around the role of the administrative city. And the lack of cohesive ideas and the conflict amongst actors result really in greater distance and lack of trust of residents towards state institutions. So what this seems to be is like a new terrain of extraction, where there's like a continuation of a process of transformation of the urban periphery of the city and a process of dispossession. And also at the institutional level is really the result of a process of decomposition and, and morphing of local government in a way that keeps sort of marginalizing the people that are already at the margins in a way. So as my final word, Lanseria will be built. Well, we definitely don't know. As it stands, it doesn't look like it will be built as the project has been envisioned. But I feel that, studying even this initial process is very interesting and important because it really tells us a lot about the contemporary urban transformation in the country and its democratic outlook. Thank you.
Thank you, Federica. In the interest of time, we'll go through the papers first and then come back for Q&A. So please do hold on to your questions for Federica. I'll actually pass down the clicker. So I'd like to introduce Ranjani. Ranjani Srinivasan is from Columbia University and will be talking about planning in the context of the Kolar Gold Fields.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ranjani, and I'm a PhD student in Columbia University in the Department of Urban Planning. And this talk is entitled Planning with an Exception, Urban Governance and Marginality in Kolar Gold Fields. And it's sort of an excerpt from ongoing fieldwork on my dissertation and a work in progress, so I would appreciate any feedback. So in this presentation, I'm sort of tracing how marginality is compounded through various iterations of urban structuring and leads to wicked problems, to quote Michael Batty, or the kinds of challenges in contemporary urban governance that we see in the global south. For example, Batty asks, why is it that we can get to the moon but not to the airport, right? So I offer an analysis of one such case of the mining community in a resource frontier that many of you might know. So I focus on one taluk in southern Karnataka, Kolar Gold Fields, which is located within the larger Kolar district. I think, yeah, over here. And situated nearly equidistant from Chennai and Bangalore, this province has undergone major shifts in political economy in the last several decades. Originally, Kolar Gold Fields began as an industrial township that grew around colonial-era gold mining and was home to two public sector enterprises, the defunct Bharat Gold Mines Limited, or BGML, which closed in 2001, and the Mini Ratna, Bharat Earth Movers Limited, or otherwise known as BIML. So today, if you look at this picture of KGF, it comprises a typical post-Fordist landscape, replete with downstream problems such as environmental degradation and economic marginalization that post-colonial resource frontiers in India often experience. So what is this wicked problem? Currently, KGF is sort of mired in political stasis, right, and deadlock between its CMC and the BGML over a transition in governance. This is because the years since 2001, which marks the closure of BGML, have seen the Ministry of Mines try to divest in the responsibility of at least part of its 12,100 acre land assets in the region. You can see the kind of extent of land assets over here, a large portion of it. And basically, the mining wards that were originally overseen by the company's sanitary board have been transferred to the local municipal council. But this process sort of remains incomplete until today, and both bodies are highly dysfunctional. They are battling each other. They're in financial distress. But to kind of understand how these battles over land governance occur, we need to kind of understand the underlying logic behind the way this area is being arranged. So if you look at this slide, and this is a historical map which kind of recreated by me of the region, the original plan of the site demonstrated a sort of hierarchical ordering of bodies and forms of labor. And we could see this, at least for this presentation, as the first round of sort of urban restructuring that transformed dry agrarian land into a mining camp or the urban. And so this site, as I said, was colonially conceptualized when John Taylor and Sons, a colonial mining company, expanded its operations in erstwhile Kolar in 1885. And this place saw a huge boom in population over just like a single decade, from like around 20,000 to almost 1 lakh of people. And so if you think about it, like if you look at the archives, around 25,000 workers, Adi Dravidar workers, were employed in the mines in 1901. And so if we look at this map over here, you can see that there's also a sort of like rigid spatial differentiation between the entire site. Two small townships, that is Robertson Pate and which is here called Urgam Pate, and Anderson Pate, sort of were established to accommodate upper caste natives who were mainly surface workers and British officers respectively. And the miners and their families, they sort of lived within this larger area in mining camps or coolie lines, so they were called, which were directly established above the mine. So beyond this obvious difference in the materiality of residences, if you think about it in this sort of differentiation, that spatial differentiation that is occurring from, the late 1800s, the obvious difference in the materiality of residences, if you look over here, these are the shanties of the coolie huts from an archival photo, and this is Roberts and Pate. So there's an obvious difference in the residences of the workers, but also most importantly, the township residents enjoyed private property rights, while the mining area was leased to the company and adjudicated by the Mysore Mines Act of 1906, which is one of the forerunners of the MMDR that we know today. So in other words, it was sort of public land. And so you can already see a difference in who can extract value from land and who can sort of gain security from tenure. So notably, then there's a second round of restructuring, right? Which is what I kind of call when the mines are nationalized in 1956 by the government of Mysore and later on reconstituted into a public sector enterprise in 1972. So you kind of see the land being transferred from the state to the union government, and you also see that the houses of the workers are immediately upgraded. You have, houses upgraded from thatch to first. This is a sort of still extant example of the KGMU, 1956 house, and here are the more recent, what we call the model houses, which are made out of masonry with a tin roof. So beyond this upgrade by the state in the provisioning for, workers, there's no real engagement with this land question, right? There is this upgradation happening, but on the other side, the state kind of expects that once the mines run dry, the workers would just leave. Yet you can kind of see, and this sort of builds into the conflicts that are happening today, that there are these inherent disparities and tensions between the way state developmentalism was impacting this area and building this area, and what were state expectations of what was going to happen to this very temporal industry. That just also signals that marginality is not a linear process, but it's one which sort of is built on structural conditions that signal precarity, which can just, the tide can turn anytime. So over here, for example, you can see this is a ground and one of those historic churches, which was given grants also by the state government at that time. So under Nehruvian state planning, you see the workers and their families, their descendants would have continuously at this point in 1972 inhabited this town for like 80 years, right? And I'm halfway through. So you can kind of see that, the state is sort of building upon what colonial amenities, very scarce ones, were given in like the late 1800s, and is now sort of building, sanitation, is providing free rations, schooling, medical care, all these things. Just to go back, so you can kind of notice that there is a tension here, as I was saying. Like, on one hand, the workers are engaging in this extremely hazardous form of labor, right? Kolar Gold Fields has one of the highest accident rates throughout its time, second only to Transvaal in South Africa. But on the other hand, they have formalized employment, they have relatively secure emplacement, and they benefit from a welfare state. So you can kind of see that even though they are very precarious, and there is a sense of marginality within, positional marginality within the larger KGF settlement, they're also much better off than most informal workers at this time, considering that this area's majority Adi Dravidar Dalit. Okay, so let's get to today. So in 2001, third round of restructuring, and all the slow gains that have been, built up over almost 120 years is sort of, in some way kind of starts to dissipate with the closure of the mines. You have now no employment opportunities almost in the mining community, and they sort of survive daily by these daily commutes, to Bangalore for contract-based labor. So most of them become your Uber drivers, Swiggy drivers, etc. Secondly, as initially mentioned, you have this transfer of the wards, right, that's going on. 18 of the 35 wards in Kolar are coming under, are actually belonging to BGML that are being transferred to the CMC. And what happens over here is, because this is a partial transfer, and of course, BGML, none of these workers have tenure rights. You have more than half the wards that are coming under the ambit of local governance, but not paying any kind of revenue taxes or property taxes. And so, like, for example, when I spoke to a municipal official, he kind of told me, we are stretched thin. We are using the revenue from the non-mining area wards to fund all our operations. Meanwhile, BGML owes us around 55 crores in arrear payments. On the other hand, if you look at, so this is the BGML office, BGML was deemed a sick industry decades before its closure and continues to be heavily in debt. After being taken to court for failing to pay its last 2,000 workers who were on its roster their VRS payments, which is like their pension, it was forced by the court to kind of sell the houses of those 2,000 workers to them for a very nominal amount, something like 1 rupee per square foot. Okay, so now you have 2,000 workers who own their house but not the land. And then you have the rest of the mining area in the map that I showed you, where there are like 25,000 houses of the mining community. So these are mining community descendants, their families, and most of these houses have actually been built by these successive regimes over time. So here comes the political deadlock, right? Because again, this cannot be a simple case of evictions because we are working in a representative democracy and these guys are the majority. So according to a prominent trade unionist and ward councillor in the region, and so he says to me, for BGML to settle its debt, it'll need to auction off its land. But this is not possible because of the political cost of such an action. The CMC will never support evictions, which will result in the loss of houses, especially when the majority of its councillors themselves will lose their houses, because most of the councillors are actually mining descendants who live in these areas. So, and most importantly, and this is a sort of political analysis that I've been able to form, having been to the site so many times, local political players such as the RPI, the Republican Party of India, the CPI and the CPIM have little state or national presence, but are most active in ward level politics. And their political survival basically hinges upon BGML. So they will basically never let this happen. And on the other hand, you have BGML who, even if it did set a precedent by regularizing the houses in the lines, it might set a sort of politically charged precedent for other similar sites. Okay, so just to conclude. So where does this leave us, right? To me, the case of KGF sort of demonstrates that yes, marginality is complex, it's often non-linear, and it often manifests when social hierarchy gets embedded into the urban. But most saliently, in a representative democracy, we can see that the unresolved marginality, which is sort of embedded within the urban, often resurfaces as these kind of intractable problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranjani. That was a really fascinating case, especially I think the story of the decline and then what that does to reconfigure space. We'll come back to that in the Q&A. I'll now hand over to Aditi. Aditi Pradhan is from JNU and will be speaking about socio-spatial segregation in Ahmedabad.
Good afternoon, everyone. So as you all can see, the title or what I'll be discussing is titled In the Shadows of City Making, Exploring the Articulation of Spatial Segregation in the City of Ahmedabad. To put it very briefly, I'll be discussing who lives where in the city of Ahmedabad and how did they end up living there. Who lives where is a very basic question to explore, especially in spatial studies. But I feel it is very important to get back to basics in order to properly comprehend the ongoing processes of marginalization in the process of city making, because urban is the present and more of it will be the future is an undeniable fact. And if more cities is the future, then who are we building the cities for? So, okay. With the ever-expanding urbanization in the country, cities have become contested territories with complexities, but a city's distinctive character, comes from the city-making processes that shape its physical and social landscapes and the interfaces between them. It is important to know that these processes are not only controlled or influenced by the governing regimes, but are also challenged and negotiated by the inhabiting population according to their respective capacities and social positionalities. Therefore, city making is a much more nuanced phenomena than it is envisaged to be under the predominant idea, which flies around wearing the neoliberal cape, professing to replicate the template of a modern city, usually which is inspired by the West. Okay, talking about Ahmedabad, Ahmedabad is one such city in the state of Gujarat, which took a giant leap towards modernity and urban transformation to situate itself on the global map as a world-class city or a mega city. And it is one of the oldest thriving cities in India and has had a stark, fragmented urban mosaic. Segregation based on caste and religion has been a persisting characteristic of Ahmedabad. And the city has had a fairly welcoming stance towards private capital and entrepreneurship, and also city revamping or redevelopment processes. One of the pioneering city redevelopment processes, the Sabarmati Riverfront development projects, started in Ahmedabad, and it aimed to rejuvenate the local urban economy and attract global capital. So there are two glaringly obvious observations one can make after going around in the city. First, the river Sabarmati, which divides the city into two parts. That is the old city on the eastern side, which is sort of the OG Ahmedabad, and the new city on the western side, which is the so-called modern Ahmedabad. And the second thing is the conspicuous communal segregation in the city. So the reigns of different rulers belonging to different religions and peopling of the city during those reigns has made the city's composition quite variegated, both on communal lines and caste lines. However, in contemporary times, the processes of city making interacting with social realities of the urban spaces have impacted the allocation and reallocation of people in the city. Different homogeneous categories of people lived in the nested structures of neighborhoods of Ahmedabad, which have been the defining tradition in the neighborhood living of Ahmedabad, which are called poles. It comes from a Sanskrit word pratoli, which means a gate to an enclosed area or a society with gates. However, significant the word gate is in the meaning of poles. There was seldom a physical gate would be constructed at the entry of pole. It would largely remain open, allowing seamless traversing of the city. And over the years, religious groups as well as caste groups have avoided spatial connections to preserve a typical lifestyle and culture by spatially segregating themselves from each other. And currently also, the predominance of such segregated living exists. However, these poles, which used to be bustling, be it any time of the day, currently some of them look deserted after 10 p.m. at night. But what was intriguing to notice was many of these old deserted houses, which gave an expression that no one has been living in them for years, had CCTV cameras installed. Some of them even had ACs installed. While talking to the original inhabitants of the poles who still live there, it was gathered that post-2002 communal rights, many households erstwhile living in poles have shifted to the newer parts of the city, that is in the new city, in the high-rise gated complexes, and use older structures as warehouses for the businesses and rent them out. And after getting more details, it was revealed that these households mostly belong to the upper castes. It is, however, a matter of pride for such households to have a home in the old city, as it has monetary benefits and makes them feel culturally superior. But when it comes to residing in the old city, it becomes an undesirable space for them. The narrow, congested space where cars cannot be parked, the smelly streets blotted with cow dung, the non-existence of branded retail shops and food joints make these spaces undesirable for them. Many respondents have responded that families do not accept marriage proposals for their girls if the groom's family still resides in the old city. Another apparent reason of this shifting up, especially after 2002 communal rights, was the rising communal polarization. And to them, living in the vicinity of Muslims felt detestable, and they no longer felt safe in the old city because of high Muslim population. However, the shifting to the new residences in the new city has been more or less restricted to the upper caste households. The lower caste households, which are colloquially known as Wagris, still live in the old residential structure or have renovated them as per their financial abilities. Since the new city offered residences at prices unaffordable to them, they didn't really have a choice of moving. The economic filter embedded in the very structural conception of residential structure in the new city posed as a roadblock for them to being even eligible to find a decent place to stay in the new city. Along with financial constraints, there are social stigma attached to these lower castes, which make them unacceptable and again undesirable in the new city, which is occupied mostly by the upper caste households. And similar is the case for Muslims. Over time, the old city has started to getting perceived as a Muslim-dominated area. In the Muslim localities, the poles for Muslims, they are called mohallas. The traditional housing structures are very less compared to poles. These are newly built houses, renovated houses, or even multi-storied buildings. When asked that why are you not shifting to the new city or do you want to shift to the new city, their standard reply was, "Idhar apne log zyada rehte hain, us taraf bahut kam hai. Here, our people are more, but very less that side." So in spite of getting the so-called modern lifestyle, they're still holding on to their identity, and the social capital serves as their strength and the source of power. If one delves into the history, Muslims have been merchants and traders, so they might have had the means and resources to shift to the new city, but it is a question to ask that did they really have the choice to shift to the new city? And coming to the part of the state, Ahmedabad has been declared as the UNESCO World Heritage Site in India in 2017. And as per it, there is a kind of an exercise which was implemented, and certain housing structures were given heritage badges as grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and there were certain regulations related to redevelopment, repairs, alteration, modifications, which applies to, and some incentives too, which apply to the heritage buildings. One of the striking observations I could make while traversing the old city is that the heritage structures of poles were mostly concentrated in Hindu population-dominated neighborhoods, and with every head turn, you can see those blue badges. But when I visited the nearby Muslim population-dominated localities, there were very few badges to find. So yes, many of the old residential structures in the Muslim localities were renovated or demolished, and new residential structures came up. So they did not have the original architecture like the upper caste Hindu populations still had. And this can explain the paucity of heritage value tags in Muslim localities. But it can also be seen walking through seats and seeing in these localities, one can observe quite a few unaltered older structures also, and which tells us that it can also be a state's deliberate attempt to invisibilize the culture and heritage of a certain religion is not a very far-fetched idea. Okay. So now coming to the next part, the river Sabarmati not only serves as a geographical divide, but also a symbolic divide between us and them. They are colloquially known as Nadi ke Ispar and Nadi ke Uspar, which is Nadi ke Ispar, this side of the city, which is the new part of the city, and Nadi ke Uspar, which is that side of the city. And when asked to a group of middle-aged men who were walking on the riverfront on the western bank, that is in the new city, if they visit the old city, their response was, "Old city, udhar kaun jata hai?" And it was shocking to hear, because the city, which is recognized at a global level, was getting described using negative adjectives by its own people. And why, when they were asked why did not they visit, the one standard response was, उधर हमारे जैसे लोग नहीं रहते, दूसरे लोग रहते हैं दाढ़ी वाले. So people like us don't live there, other people live there who have beards. And it is also interesting to note that people living in the new city who are fond of eating non-vegetarian food complain about not getting non-vegetarian food in Ahmedabad, but old city is a heaven for non-vegetarian food lovers, which kind of indicates the understanding and knowledge of the city, of this people living in the city, which is limited to the new city only. So I would like to conclude by saying that on the layer of a socially fragmented urban fabric, over a period of time, another layer of divide based on perception on how urban spaces should look like and feel like has germinated. A young group of men and women sitting outside a cafe in the new city were asked if they visit the old city, and the men responded that not if it is really essential to go there. It's shabby, shady, congested, unclean too, and our bikes get stuck in the street. So to the most interviewed people inhabiting in the western part of India, the eastern part is the shabby and shady part of the city, which they look down upon and where people from decent homes should not visit. So there is an intersection of lack of existence of how a city should look like and religion or caste, which kind of isolates a certain part of the city. And interestingly enough, the intersection of ostracization of particular communities residing there for ages and the disdain towards the presentation of these urban spaces intensifies the process of othering and creates a strong sense of stigma. And this stigma is often used to discredit differentness. And the so-called perceived unwanted and outcast are crammed into certain spaces, viewed by others as festering souls of body on the body of society. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditi. So we can move on to the next speaker, Shilpa. If Shilpa is going to take a minute, we can take one quick round of questions. Is Shilpa ready with her presentation? Yes.
Shilpa Krishnan, right?
Shilpa, yes, Shilpa Krishnan.
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, so so Shilpa Krishnan is with us. She's from IIT Guwahati and will be speaking on capitalist state and space. So I'll hand it over to you, Shilpa, and then once we are done, we will take our final round of questions at the end. And Shilpa, after you, I'll request Rupali to go next. And then after Rupali, we have Shahana who's going last.
So shall I start sharing my screen?
Yes, please, do go ahead.
Hello, and thank you for having me here. Even though it's virtually, it's a privilege to present at IIHS Urban Arc 2024. So I'm a PhD scholar of IIT Guwahati, and I am doing my PhD in sociology. And this is a part of my research for my PhD. And as the title suggests, capital state and space, affirmative, reactionary, and dialectical. My study is basically, the objective of this study is basically to understand or unravel the various narratives that come out while implementing a state-sponsored development project. So before getting into this development project, which is the Vizhinjam International Seaport Limited, which is located in Trivandrum, a district of Kerala, I would like to talk about Kerala, which is the southern state of India. So now Kerala is quite well known for its the Kerala model of development. It has been in the forefront with regard to literacy, with regard to housing, with regard to land reformation, and also health facilities. Currently, there has been a rise for development projects, and there has been the state of Kerala has actually taken interest in development projects as there is a stagnation in the job opportunities. This is also because of the global rise for of development policies and the national narrative which demands industrialization and capital intensive development. And in this context, what happens is that the state is purposefully using land as a resource for economic growth. And we hear with regard to Vizhinjam International Seaport Limited, which I would be calling WHISTLE from here on. WHISTLE is a multi-purpose transshipment port, which is being constructed in the coastal district, Trivandrum coastal region, and this is the southernmost coastal region of Kerala. Now, if you look at WHISTLE, the WHISTLE, even though the project was in the pipeline for almost 3 decades, the entire project actually came into action in the 2010 onwards. So from 2010 to 2011 to 13, the environmental impact assessment was carried out. A public hearing was carried out during the July 2013, and the construction of port started in 2015. Interestingly, the Congress government was ruling in 2015, and the opposition party, the CPM party, was actually against this port, and they definitely did not want the construction of the port. But right now, as a CPM party has been governing consecutively for the last 2 terms, they have been adamant in implementing this port. Now this port has been leased out to the Adani ports under PPP, the public-private partnership, and it has acquired 66 hectares of coastal waters and 600 to 700 acres of land, and a breakwater which is built up to 3.2 kilometers in length. So why is this project so important and why does it require an introspection? So this is probably India's one and only transshipment port, and it is situated in the southernmost part of Kerala, which is also, if you look at it, is quite it's also the trade route, and it connects between Colombo, which is currently the area where the region where most of the large vessels are being parked, and the ships and the containers have to be exchanged and brought into India. So this would actually save a lot of money, taxes, and it would also provide job opportunities for a lot of people. And it is actually touted as nation's pride, and it has been clocked under this national as well as state, the state of Kerala's economic growth, a source of economic growth, and it is also a means of livelihood for a large number of people who are right now finding it difficult to find jobs, and who have come out, who have graduated in Kerala. This is because Kerala, in the past, unlike the other states in India, has been has not encouraged industrialization earlier. So it is in a very late capitalist mode, and it is a partially capitalist state where much of the income actually comes from agrarian output. So if you look at this, the region of the port, the orange line you can see that is actually this channel for ships, and this entire port is built in. It's actually built on eroding coast. The coastal region of Trivandrum is an eroding coast, and which has been not mentioned in the environmental impact assessment report, which was sent for the Ministry of Environment. So, since it's an eroding coast, any man-made structure that is built on this coast would cause erosion, severe coastal erosion on the northern side and accretion on the southern side. So, if you look at this, my study basically comprised of in-depth interviews with fish workers, board members, councillors, the WISL CEO, Ministry of Fisheries, and also researchers working on coastal issues. Now, the fish workers, as you see, artisanal fish workers are not a homogeneous entities. Basically, it comprises of a lot of different livelihood means. There are shoreline workers, there are catamaran workers, deep sea fishers, mussel collectors, there are fish vendors, peelers, dry fish makers, net makers, boat engine repairers. And when I conducted these in-depth interviews with these people, I realized that the needs of each livelihood is completely different. And it also changes according to the region where they belong to as well. Coming back to the region, if you look at this, the areas where I had done data collection, it has to be divided into three regions. One is the region of Mullur and Viljam, which came under the 10-kilometer radius of the environmental impact assessment. This is particularly the region where the port is being constructed, and the majority of the compensation and rehabilitation package is being introduced and put forward by the state in this region. Now, the northern side of the port comprises of villages such as Valyadura, Kochtopu, Shangamugam, and Pundura. And these places have been facing severe coastal erosion over the last 3-4 years, where hundreds of people had to be evacuated, and they have been living in large godowns and schools and in 6 to 6 feet cubicles. And they're still continuing to live there. The government has actually provided them with a rehabilitation package, which comprise of 10 lakh rupees, and they've also provided 5,500 rupees for rent every month, which is which is not feasible at all. It is impossible to even purchase land in the state of Kerala, where land value is very high. Now, the southern part of the port is where there is coastal accretion, and these regions have people who are employed in mussel collection and shore scene workers. And the compensation package included over here are for people from Adimalathura who work along the coast, and with the approach channel, they wouldn't be able to access the sea for their livelihood. Now, the most interesting aspect over here is that while these people were given compensation, they were asked by the state to surrender their equipment and boat, and to give in writing that they would give up their identity as a fish worker. This seems quite problematic when a development project is being implemented in a very democratic society. So, as you can see, this is a region. The region marked in red is the place where coastal erosion is currently taking place. The region marked in green is where the port is being built, and the region marked in yellow is where the accretion is happening. So, in all these regions, if you look at it, the problems persisting, the problems faced by the fish workers are quite different. While the people living in the regions of coastal erosion, they face the threat of high tides and waves washing away their houses and their boats. and having no a place to park their boats, the people in Adimalattra, Puar, and Poriyur, even though they gain land, what they are skeptical about is that when the approach channel comes, they wouldn't be able to access sea. They would build a sea wall. The state would build a sea wall, and this would prevent them from accessing sea.
Shilpa,
Moreover,
sorry to interrupt. Could you move to your concluding comments? You're out of time. Could you move to concluding comments?
Yeah. How many minutes do I have?
You're out of time, but you could just quickly wrap up and conclude.
All right. So I'll just take 2 minutes. So basically, the most of the respondents in these the fishing community, they belong to the Latin Catholic diocese. So the church basically has a dual role over here. They act as the state representative as well as the fisherfolk representative. So, the same is the case with the regions that is populated by the Muslim community and Hindu temples in regions which is inhabited by the Hindus. So the religious leaders act as the fisherfolk representatives, and the narratives that come out of the community is actually not the ones that go to the state. So while a lot of the lower income groups, that is the fish workers who are artisanal fish workers, do not gain much from the project, there are higher and middle income groups who are landowners who actually gain from this, and they are for the port, and they also receive a large amount of money for their landed property. So there has also been questions regarding the authenticity of the environmental impact assessment, and while the lower income groups are quite skeptical about the EIA, the higher income groups have no question about the EIA, as this has been carried out with their representation. So there has been very less public engagement, and the current social structure and the power dynamics has made it impossible for the people to actually move towards the state and talk to the state or address their concerns. The respondents who
Shilpa, could you move to your conclusion? I would like to hurry you up so that everybody else gets time to go through their presentations as well. Yeah.
So this is my discussion or my conclusion. So basically, the heterogeneous nature of the fishing community is something that the state has forgotten or probably overlooked while implementing the project, as well as the rehabilitation measures. The feasibility of the project is questioned by the fisher folk who are actually from the lower income group. And the people who have actually promoted and who have worked for this project are the major political parties, the religious leaders, and the property owners who tend to gain from the project. So there is actually a kind of discrimination, and the power dynamics over here, the existing power dynamics is again being destabilized, and there is a respatialization happening over here in these territories. So that's all. Thank you, and I'm so sorry for taking up your time.
No, thank you, Shilpa. That was a really interesting presentation. So we'll move on to Rupali now. Rupali Shrivastava is...
Yes, ma'am. Present, sharing my screen.
Okay. We can't see you, Rupali. I think.
Ma'am, actually, there is some internet issue. If I open my camera, then it will be gone.
Okay, sure. No worries. Please go ahead.
Okay, so my topic is exploring urban marginalities, a comprehensive analysis of social inequalities. So I have to tell that, like in the introduction, like in the recent years, city has been changing a lot, and more people are moving in, and some groups of people in these cities felt left out. They are not treated fairly. So the research wants to understand why this is happening. We are looking into different parts of the problem, like why some people have less money or in different parts of the city. It is about finding solutions and focusing on the cities that is nearby the coast they have unique challenges with the climate change. We want to understand how many in how ways the city grows and the environment are connected, and it is important for the people who make decisions about them to know what is actually happening. So the problem statements is the thing is that the problem coming that like unequal access to resources are there in some neighborhoods. People don't have fair chances to get things they need, like good schools or hospitals, and this makes it hard for everyone in the area to do well economically. Second is that unfair planning is there, like sometimes city isn't fair and certain groups get more disadvantages. This can mean that some neighborhoods are more likely to face problems like floods or storms because they don't have enough protection. And third is they left out of the important things, that is social exclusion. Some groups of people don't get included in more decisions, or they are treated fairly. This can make it difficult, to have a say in what happens in their community and get the protection that they need under the law. And then the last is the infrastructure gaps. In some places, the basic things like road or emergency services are not good enough. When something like a big storm happens, it can make a life even harder for the people who already have these kinds of challenges. So, based on some literature reviews that underlying facts shaping upon the urban marginalities, the insights from Dugo Uganda case study that this highlights the necessity of comprehensive, like the dynamics of risk and uncertainty in the evaluation of like poverty, and it also emphasized the importance of interventions of marginalized populations. Second is right to the city, so it actively shape their urban surroundings, like it becomes a critical lens through which they can know how restricted access is there to the right contributors to urban marginalities, like challenges practices in the process. Third is like Messi and Wilson's framework. It established links between like social relations, lying how they develops urban poverty with a focus concept, like their structural changes that is impacting the economic mobility. And last is Philip view on poverty, and it is consequences of factors that deals with physical fragility and socio economic isolation, and also emerges as an element that is contributing to influencing living standards of those peoples and generating those insecurity and concerning the future well-being of that. So third is the conceptual framework of this research. So we want to understand a situation really, we used to frame our framework so that it can help the dimensions of the problem. So it adopts a framework that is inspired by a multidimensional perspective that can explore marginalities through four different lenses. And then the special dimension is all about space and place, so it looks at how things are arranged in an area. Now, for example, it considers where people live, what important buildings are, and how the land is used. So, in our analysis, I will study how the physical layout of the people affects their lives, and is there enough green space. So, this will help understand the physical features of the location impact of that. Then economic dimension that focuses on money and jobs. So how people making a living, what kinds of jobs are available there, and if many people in the area have good jobs, so can they afford those needs. It can contribute to a healthy economic dimension. And if there is a lack of job opportunity, then it can lead to economic challenges. So, to understand economic dimensions, this will help us to see how financial factors play an important role in those lives. Then last is social dimension. So, in that, it deals with people and then relationships. It's look how individual interacts, what communities are like, and how inclusive the society is. So, to explore aspects like social norm, discrimination, and community support, and this helps the social dynamics with the community and understand how they contribute to the over well-being of the members. Then, the methodology which is used in this, it is a mixed method approach, it will give a comprehensive understanding, it will utilize a mixed method approach to gain a understanding of urban marginalities, and will conduct qualitative interviews with individuals in the marginalized communities to uncover their lived experiences and challenges, and also utilizes the census data and the survey results for the analysis. Then also and it can ensures the holistic examination of the subject, like by integrating qualitative and quantitative methods, and also allows a well-rounded explanation of urban marginalities by considering them to the different approaches. So, at last, the study incorporates quantitative data analysis that will includes the examines of census data, survey results, and also the research integrates the fieldwork surveys and data analysis. So, this combination ensures a well-rounded examination of the urban marginalities that will capture the complexities through these things, and also the study enhances its primary research by conducting an relevant literature study of that, and all then these are the implications, the research provides both practical and theoretical insights into the challenges of urban marginalities. So the identification of the things will it a tangible outcome, like allowing the policymakers and urban planners to prioritize intervention efforts, and the research also equips the decision maker with actionable information to direct resources where they are most urgently needed. And the conclusion serves as a call to continue exploring the challenges that is posed by the urban marginalities, and they underscore the need for sustained research efforts like policy adaptations, collaborative actions to address evolving urban dynamics and ensure the well-being of urban population. So, the research conclusions to a proactive and holistic approach to create urban environments that are inclusive, equitable, and resilient in the face of diverse challenges. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rupali. So thank you to all the speakers for a really interesting and rich, diverse, and very provocative set of reflections. I think we've heard a lot about sort of the differentiated nature of impacts when certain new developmental projects, policies are promised, and either the projects themselves do not come to pass, or the kinds of development outcomes that are promised do not come to pass, or you have the case of economic decline, as in the KGF. So it's it's a lot of material to think with. We have about 15 minutes or so for questions. So I'll start by opening it out. I know everybody's been very patient with their questions. So I'll open it out to the audience first. And if there's still time, I'll take a couple of questions. So I'll start with you at the back. You raised your hand first, then you, and then you. And then I'll come around again. We'll do 3 questions at a time, and then we'll come for another round.
So my question is for Aditi. So basically the idea of poor itself kind of segregation in Gujarat and very well articulate by Achyut Yagnik. And you can also find out with Narsi Mehta's Undi and Kuvarbainu, Mameru and somewhere. So this is my knowledge area as far as. But I have a question that what kind of changes you are pursuing so far with your research which locates spatial segregation of Ahmedabad. Instead, the applicable, a very well-known act called Disturb Area Act. And another question that why the exigency of segregation successfully generated manufactured otherness among the communities.
Yeah, I'm audible. So my question to Rajni, rather question, something that I hate when people do it to me. I'm adding to your workload. So my point is, I come from economics, sort of. So if you know about dependency theory, it talks about core and periphery. And can we say that as Bangalore became the metropolitan, it is KGF sort of became its periphery, whereas it was its own economic zone before Bangalore became a full-fledged city? And did Bangalore in a way salvage on whatever remained of KGF? Like KGF could have been its own city post mining town. A lot of mining town did become some other sort of city. So did sort of did Bangalore salvage whatever remained of KGF capital, human? You talked about people migrating. Did capital migrated from there and everything? And just a small question for Aditi. Something that you mentioned about how east part of the town is the one with not high property value and industrial and everything, and then a river is a sort of dividing factor, and then the southern part being the posh one. And I know it's not your feet, but nonetheless, something that we see replicated again and again, which happened in Delhi as well. Like Jamna Par is the word that we use in Delhi for people across the river. And again, East Delhi is where most of the migrants ended up being due to various regimes during Congress era when migrants. So yeah, and can you how did it happen? You live in Delhi, you've seen in there, and how did it happen? So yeah, something on that. Thank you.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation. My question is for the Smart City presentation. I just wanted to sort of, I got stuck with the phrase that you said, we don't have an imagination for a democratic space, in the sense, once we are given an opportunity to create a space, we actually do not know what we want in that sense. And since morning, we've been thinking about this question of that there's an imaginary of the past. We are stuck in our own imaginary images in that sense. But yet, when it comes to imagine a future together in that sense, we are severely lacking. And somehow there is something about that position of the imagined world that we want to create that we're not able to articulate in the times we are living in. How do you look at that question, and what are the processes through which this imagination is being worked out? Or is everything reduced to a transactional instrumental relationship, or is there a space for creating some kind of language, some kind of a form of life from which that imagination can be retrieved in?
We'll do one round of responses. Maybe we'll start from Aditi, Ranjani, and then Federica, and then we'll take another round of questions.
Okay, thank you for the question. So, Disturbed Areas Act, yes. If we go towards the state side of ghettoized, not ghettoized, spatial segregation, then there's this Disturbed Areas Act, which was introduced by Congress government in Gujarat in 1986. And the aim of the act was to curb spatial segregation based on religion by preventing distressed sale of properties in allegedly violence-prone areas or disturbed areas of the city. However, there is a very vast secondary literature which exists and which shows that this very law is deployed towards the opposite ends, to perpetuate spatial segregation and ghettoization based on religion. So there are many facets to this act, but I will in the interest of time, I will just concentrate on maybe one for now. That there is a discursive reconstruction of the act, that the official and the local narratives have transmuted the meaning of disturbance, which is defined in the law as riots or mob violence, to the nuisance created by the mere presence of Muslims. So one of the provisions of the act is that it prohibits all property transaction in areas of the city that are designated as disturbed areas, unless they are approved by the district collection, who must ensure that there is a formal inquiry process and there is fairness. But the Muslim living in these areas, if they want to sell their property and use that money to move, the process of that and of the whole process of going to the district collector and then all the other thing is so cumbersome that it kind of serves as a mechanism to ensure that they stay where they have been staying, which is kind of constricting their movement as well as if constricting them in a particular territory. Okay, coming to the eastern side of the city and the western side of city. So the high property value. The thing is, in the eastern part of the city, or which is, I think, the old part of the city, it's not like it does not have high property values, or it's not like it's kind of the very, very robust and dynamic economic hub of the city. But I would like to bring here the one of the concepts introduced by Louis Leconte, who says there is something called territorial stigmatization. So in spite of that place having that in economic sense, it might have a high property value, it might be generating a lot of economic value, but since there is a particular community living there, and there is this whole notion of, I would also like to bring in the notion of purity and pollution, that there are some polluted bodies which are living there. That is why even when the space which might have a very huge economic significance, it gets stigmatized. And what adds to the stigmatization is how we perceive that an urban area should look like. We really do not delve into how urban spaces have developed in the context of India, and there is an aspirational imagery which is showcased, which shows all kinds of, like, it's the modern picture of any city, be it any Gurgaon. All of them look the same if you go there. You go to the new part of the Ahmedabad, you go to Gurgaon, after a point they will feel the same because of the kind of buildings, the infrastructure they have. So there is another layer of that. It's not that they are, it's the perception that there is a symbolic production of perception which shows that this area is shabby and this area is shady, and when I went there for my field work, if I get into an auto and I would just normally start chit-chatting with the auto driver, he would tell him my purpose of visit. He would tell me that please don't visit these certain areas, and because you're not even in the daytime, because they are very unsafe. And these areas happen to be particular areas living where particular communities lived. But I went there and I conducted my field work, and it's just somewhere very much in the perception, which is not just created by the popular media, but also by selling an imagery of what urban should look like. I hope I've answered the questions.
Okay. Thanks for your question. Yeah, I'm familiar with dependency theory, but the thing with these theories is that they kind of naturalize uneven development, right? And there's nothing really natural about many of these flows of capital. So yeah, it was very perceptive of you. KGF has had many lives as a hinterland. First, it was, a hinterland for capital, for, let's say, Europe, Britain, etc. In the colonial period. And then after that, now it has become a hinterland for labor for Bangalore. But I think Janaki Nair actually has done a lot of work on this, and she very well summarizes why Bangalore kind of made it and KGF didn't. And that's actually got to do with the kind of political and sovereignty issues that were happening at that time, where Bangalore actually came under the administrative influence of the Mysore kingdom, the Mysore state, while KGF was under the sort of parastatal, which was John Taylor and Sons. So the British at all points just wanted these towns to kind of be monocultural regional economies, right? So they didn't really want Bangalore to diversify from, I think, a mill town or whatever. But it was because of the Mysore state sort of pushing and using whatever little bit of sovereignty it had that Bangalore was able to diversify its economic profile in a way that KGF couldn't, because KGF was under the, like, if you look at the archives, I think it was under the sole, like, sort of juridical power of John Taylor and Sons, which was sort of acting like a state. So that's kind of the reason why there was no diversification in the economy, though actually KGF was, like, got electricity very much earlier than Bangalore, and it was a sort of like boom town.
Thanks for the question, and apologies for going in and out. So it's a very interesting question, and I don't think I've got an answer. I've got a few reflections on that. And I mean, the first one is that from a structural perspective, the city as it is suits quite a few people, and especially the political and economic elites. They don't want transformation. And I mean, they adopt the question of transforming, moving from the apartheid to the post-apartheid, but those are just buzz concepts. And most of the political and economic elites in Johannesburg are quite comfortable with the way the city is, that there's no really motivation for transformation. But on the other side, I mean, there's a few things here. The first one is that it is hard to sit down and think, how do we want a city to be? And I mean, like, the spaces that are being created are spaces that are highly regimented and highly structured in a way that don't allow for that. So public participation processes, for instance, are just yet another way of not putting forward transformation or imagining something new. And also there is this sort of capture of ideas, right? So, these traveling ideas of like what's smart and what's not smart and what's developmental and not, they actually suffocate quite a lot of the imaginary. And I think the first step will be to sort of be away from those. It doesn't mean rejecting them, but maybe arrive to them from a different angle. And all the question of like best practices and international standards, they're quite suffocating. And linked to the fact that elites are not quite into, this kind of emancipatory transformation is also the question that they don't want to work with what's existing. What's existing is highly complex. And it's actually tough. I mean, the city center of Johannesburg was in fire and 80 people died in a building only a month ago. And obviously the easy way out is to say, well, let's just delete the city center. We just move out and do something else. But to close my answer, and I think there is a recent sort of way of looking at a future. I don't know if you've heard about the future literacy activities and studies. And it's been promoted by the UNESCO. So again, we can debate, many things about that. But they do promote a lot of workshops and roundtables, really creating space for imagining the future under, in many different levels. And this is not predicting. So it's not an exercise of predicting because we want to have indicators and things like that, but it's really imagining the future. But cities are highly complex. So, yeah.
Thank you. We have a few questions. We have a few hands from the last round, and we have a question online as well. So I think at the back, there's one, and then we'll come to you, and then we'll take the question online. I don't know if we'll have time for everybody because we have a very short tea break before the next panel. So we'll go to you.
My, it's not not a question, but a compliment and comment on Shilpa Krishnan's, on regarding the Birmingham International, transshipment port. Actually, it is now this port is of a very national importance because it is the closest to the international sea route. Compared to Dubai, Colombo and Singapore, which is now currently handling the Indian goods. So it is it support basically Indian support all the Indian ports and Bangladesh and other neighboring ports. So that is the prominence of it. Now so being so of national importance, none of the political parties actually opposed it. I think there was a comment, ministry point that it has been signed during Congress government, but it is not but the opposition of the CPM that time was on the rehabilitation issues and re-employment of the fishermen force. The opposition was there, yes, that is from the from non-political entities. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit, Shilpa, I think particularly your case was, especially surprising because it is the political context of Kerala where all of this is taking place. So I'm going to let the audience continue with their questions. I'll take one from here and then we'll take the one online.
Yeah. Aditi, this is just a clarification from you. I might have missed it. So, as I understand your study, it's going beyond this core margin dichotomy. As I understand, not that the core groups live nadi ke us par and the margins live nadi ke is par. So with this massive transformation that's happening, you're right that cities have become contested, complex, paradoxical spaces. Correct me if I'm wrong. So is your study hinting at that there is a constant struggle between identity and aspiration within the communities, and therefore the communities are experiencing an internal fragmentation in the sense that those who want to transcend the socio-spatial stigma, they are moving into the new city. And aesthetic is somewhere playing out in this whole process of moving out to the city. So this is just a clarification from you. Thank you.
I'll just hold. Could one of you, I can't read it, it's too small for me.
I can read it.
Yeah.
It's to Aditi. What is the impact of UNESCO's declaration of the Old City as World Heritage Site on the land and property values on the site? And is the declaration binding to the municipal state with regards to capitalizing on the value? Would this deter the state from real estate development on or off the site?
Okay, I'm going to just take one last question. If somebody has a question which is actually not to Aditi for one of the other speakers, yes, please go ahead.
So my question is to Federica. And in addition to what Chetan asked about the struggle with bringing this imagined ideal of democracy into the symbolic, and the struggle with being able to articulate of what the administration mean by the democratic imaginary. In addition to that, I want to ask if there is a genuine struggle actually persisting among the administration of Lanseria, or is it just saying that we want to build a democratic city and actually just using this imaginary to then build anything in the name of the democratic ideals. As we see, we use the exception of law to actually transgress it. So is it a genuine struggle among the administration, or is it just being used so as to meet their ends ultimately?
Okay, thanks. I mean, there is a genuine struggle in the administration, and this is not, news. It's been going on for a long time. But, deciding to build a whole new complex, in the name of, building if we decide to build something new, then the administrative struggle doesn't exist anymore. Obviously, it doesn't make sense. So it is true. I mean, and something I could uncover in the presentation, but the whole sort of institutional setup is under duress, obviously, at the local level, provincial and national level. So there are challenges, structural challenges in place. But those won't be fixed by creating a new city.
And in turn, those struggles that are existing now don't allow like a thinking of what a democratic city will be. So, yeah.
Okay, so the aspiration and identity part. If we ask, as a matter of fact, I have asked this question to the people who are living, who have their residences in the old part of the city, that how do they utilize the new part of the city? Do they visit it or not? So they said, yes, they do visit the city, they utilize the mall, they utilize the open spaces, and they utilize everything that the new city offers to them on that aspirational level. But when I move a step beyond and ask them, would you want to settle there? Then they take a pause and say, no, we are comfortable living here. Because it's not just aspiration, but also in the current times, I would like to highlight that identity is taking precedence over aspiration, because for them, yes, it is a matter of their survival. When I was doing my field work, there were different polls in the old city, and there was no poll where I was asked about my identity or who I was, where I came from. They just saw me as a girl coming from maybe for some academic purpose and asking certain questions. But there were 2 mohallas where I was asked that where have I come from, why am I asking this question? And I don't actually blame them, because it is a time where they have to be they are being careful about who is gathering information about what. Because seriously, there is a question on their identity and their survival. So yes, they want that they want to satisfy their aspirational needs, but at the same time, they want to survive too. And they want a safe environment too. They want to live where they know that there's a social capital which can strengthen. And even if they're moving to a new city, first of all, I've asked many brokers, they have said that if you come as a Muslim person, it's very difficult to find a home, because there are certain rules in the housing societies that no non-veg, and that no Muslim sometimes very clearly, or sometimes it's just no non-veg, because they assume that if someone is Muslim, we will not say, just to be politically correct, that they are Muslim, but we will say that we do not accept non-vegetarians, which will necessarily exclude that part of the population. So I think I have been able to somehow answer that question, or maybe give some response to that. And about the real estate value. Well, the interesting part is the whole heritage project. It kind of tries to preserve the old residential structure and the old essence of the city of Ahmedabad. So there is a very limited possibility of real estate development, because if there are residential structure which are old and which come under the heritage plan, you cannot make a change. Even if you make a change, you have to take a lot of permissions. B, it's a Muslim dominated area. Even if people come there for real estate, it is only for a certain community, and that is Muslim. Hindus would not, even if they build like high rises, there is a very particular community which will come and live there. So there is not much value. C, as like in the case of Johannesburg, she was saying that there is an existing city, and to which city, that city is old, that city has narrow roads, that city is like one of the older cities of India. And if someone wants to move into the old a city, they would want that the functions that a modern city or a new city serves, which the old city will not be able to serve, because it is very difficult to widen the roads. It is very difficult to do construction work. So that is also a factor why real estate might not be a viable thing, or it has not boomed in the olden part of the city, in the old part of the city. Thank you.
So thank you to all the speakers and to everyone who has sort of patiently listened in. I'm sorry we cut off a last few questions, but do please feel free to find the speakers over the tea break, and we'll reconvene at 4:30. Thank you.